President Trump loves to make history, and he made history again by apparently announcing that he is not going to be a candidate for another term as president. That would be in violation of the 22nd Amendment. And so President Trump is going to make do with finishing his second term, his full 8 years as a two-term president. But what about our past presidents who have gone beyond that? There's, of course, as people know, only one president who got more than two terms, Franklin Roosevelt, and running for the third time in the middle of World War II. We weren't in World War II yet. It was 1940, and of course, Pearl Harbor was 1941. But with President Roosevelt, enormously popular both times, and with people worried about a worldwide conflict, he decided to run and ran for a third time and ran for a fourth time, won both times. Though what's interesting is the third and the fourth races for president were a little bit less landslide victories for Franklin D. Roosevelt. What about other presidents? Roosevelt's cousin, Theodore Roosevelt, is very well known of having gone for a third term as president when he ran initially as a Republican candidate against his chosen successor. Roosevelt became president when President McKinley was shot. He served 3 years of McKinley's term, and then he was elected by a landslide for a term of his own. He decided not to run again, chose William Howard Taft, who was a member of his administration, as his successor, but then didn't like the way that Taft was running the country, and Theodore Roosevelt decided to make a comeback. He ran for the Republican nomination, won a bunch of primaries. Primaries had been fairly newly developed. And despite winning those primaries, he lost at the convention and then ended up running as an independent with the Progressive Party, which became known as the Bull Moose Party, because Roosevelt had told people, "I am as fit as a bull moose, and you can use me to the limit." It didn't work. He won only 27% of the vote. The other candidate who tried to run for a third term but didn't make it was U.S. Grant. And U.S. Grant, of course, the hero who had won the Civil War, served 2 terms. He was popular, was reelected by a substantial margin, and then retired. But then his loyal followers persuaded him to try to make a comeback after having been out of the White House for 4 years. He ran again in 1880, but didn't make it at the convention. It was a very divided Republican convention, and even though Grant, the former president, got some 300 convention votes, he didn't get the nomination. The nomination went to James A. Garfield, who was shot and killed some 6 months into his term. So that's another story. There are also 2 presidents we had who ran as third-party candidates, but this didn't make it to the White House. But these were not third-termers. They were just people after one term. That was true for Millard Fillmore, who ran as a know-nothing candidate for president, where the entire issue was immigration and the opposition to Irish and German immigration. The other candidate, Martin Van Buren, became increasingly anti-slavery after he left the presidency, and came back after he had lost the presidency to William Henry Harrison. He came back and tried to make a comeback running as a free soil candidate for president, somebody who was anti-slavery, and got a substantial percentage of the votes, close to 10%, but did not win. And then finally, you have the last third term possibility, and it was the last one, because when they passed the 22nd Amendment, This was back in 1951. It was after Franklin Roosevelt had been elected to a third term and to a fourth term. After he had been elected to both those extra terms, the public opinion was we should go back to the George Washington two-term tradition. But in order to get that through, the incumbent president was made an exception. The incumbent president was Harry Truman, who, with just 1 month into Roosevelt's fourth term, Truman became president when Roosevelt died unexpectedly. Well, expectedly for people who knew more about his medical condition, but again, that is another story. In drafting the 22nd Amendment to get it ratified, and it was ratified by 1951, Truman was still president, and he was exempted from the limitation. So he could have run for a third term. Some people think he might have won the third term, except he allowed himself to be listed on the primary for the New Hampshire primary. And this is the very beginning of the time when the New Hampshire primary was very important. Truman lost the New Hampshire primary and then pulled out of the presidential race. He did not run for that third term. He lost to a guy named Estes Kefauver, who's a fascinating character in his own right. He is a senator from Tennessee, and he was famous for wearing a coonskin cap even before the popularity of the Davy Crockett Disney TV show. So basically, President Trump would have been the only president, except for Franklin Roosevelt, who actually got a third term. And again, I think there's a great sigh of relief that President Trump has 3 more years to command the public stage, and let us hope to provide worthy service and effective service for this greatest nation on God's green earth. A little background about third-termers and would-be third-termers in that White House, which is in the process of reconstruction.